Composing.
Compose like an adult.
Let's be as composed as the propane.
Not that composed.
No.
We want to be like 75%
Yeah.
composed. Hey everybody, I'm Mike Levy here in Pemberton for Pinkbike's annual fall field test, and this black bike is Propain's all-new Hugene. It's a 140mm travel trail bike with a 150mm fork that's rolling on 29-inch wheels. Now this is the latest iteration of the Hugene, and it's got 10mm more travel than the previous version, features updated geometry, and sports an all-new and a little bit lighter carbon fiber frame. Propain says that this new version weighs about 300 grams less than its predecessor. Now, how did they do that? There's a few things. First off, they've switched up the carbon fiber to use slightly different versions in different places where required. Now, the frame tubes are straighter, and that means that there's less material used. And the last detail, this upper link, it used to be aluminum, and now it's carbon fiber. Other details include a ton of frame protection where you'd expect to see it, room for a large size bottle inside the front triangle, and there's also a spot for you to bolt some kind of tool kit to the bottom of the top tube. The bike also uses a threaded bottom bracket and a universal derailleur hanger. Let's move on to geometry, and this being the latest version of the Hugene, it's no surprise that the front end has grown. We're seeing that from basically every brand. Let's talk about suspension design next, and at this field test, we have everything from single pivots to horse links to all the pivots, with this Hugene fitting into the latter category using Propain's Pro 10 virtual pivot point system. Basically, it's a dual link system, and the shock actually floats between those two links. It's compressed between them, and it's not mounted to the front triangle, and it delivers 140mm of rear wheel travel. Our stock high-end build comes with factory level Fox suspension, and that's a Float X shock and a 36 with the Grip 2. They both get the Kashima coated tubes. All right, Kaz and Alicia have been riding the Hugene non-stop here in Pemberton over the last few weeks. So let's talk to them and find out how this bike performs. All right, guys, the last time we had a Propain at field test, it was the Spindrift. It has a bunch more travel than the Hugene that we're talking about now, but I remember that Spindrift being a rocket ship when you're on the gas. Similar story, same suspension design.
Yep, definitely same story. Less travel, but just as easy to accelerate on. There's minimal suspension bob. It's one of those bikes, you step on the pedals, it's moving you forward. Doesn't feel like there's any lag, there's no wallowing. It's kind of the climber's trail bike out of the mix that we have right now.
So how about comparing it to something like the Starling Murmur? That's a single pivot, coil sprung bike. Just looking at the two bikes, they're pretty different. Mm-hmm. How do they climb?
The Starling, it's a little slower, it's a little more sensitive, it's a little, like, it'll soak up all the bumps and have traction for days, but it's not gonna get you up the hill as quickly. The Propain is really well supported, it is light, it just wants to go up the hill. It has kind of a slacker seat tube angle than the Starling does, but it doesn't sit quite as far deep in the suspension. And so I think overall, it still puts you forward over the bike in the same way that the Starling does.
All right. Kaz, when things get really technical and there's little to no traction, I mean, you guys are telling me this bike accelerates like a demon. In my mind, that means that the bike probably uses a little more anti-squat than the other bikes, and maybe it has a bit less traction. But is that the case, or?
I think it's fair to say, yeah, there's maybe a tiny bit less traction, but it's kind of made up for, in my mind, by the efficiency. So say that Score or even the Stump Jumper Evo, it does feel like the rear wheel does hug the ground a little bit better. Where this one, when you're pedaling, it almost stiffens up, and it might not be quite tracking all those contours. Mm-hmm. But just the fact that it just kind of wants to keep propelling you forward, it's cliche to say the bike climbs like a hardtail, but if you're going to make that analogy out of all of them, this is the closest to getting that firmest pedaling feel.
Right, right.
That's all without using any switches on that shock. I never had to reach down for any climb lever or anything.
Right. Now, I have some contradictory news here, though, because in the efficiency test, our very scientific efficiency test, it was 5th out of 6 bikes, second to last.
Yeah.
Fake news, man.
Yeah, fake news.
I don't believe it.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Both of us, before Henry went out and headed out on the efficiency test, we wrote down our predictions.
Yeah.
And this was definitely the one that didn't match up with what we thought. All the other ones are kind of similar, kind of matched our trail impressions. But this one, for some reason, 5th out of 6 on the efficiency test. So, you better watch that video and kind of see how it all sorted out. But it does feel extra efficient, very snappy.
And regardless of the efficiency test results, you guys still stand by this bike being the climber's bike out of your 6 trail bikes.
Yep. If I had one little gripe, I might want that seat tube angle to be a little bit steeper. I mean, 76 degrees is still pretty steep. We have bikes on test that have 78 degree seat tube angles. And I kind of like the little bit more upright position those allow. But I think that the benefit of that slightly slacker seat tube angle is riders that live in slightly flatter areas. If they have like a big paved road approach or kind of more undulating terrain, it's actually gonna be a benefit because you won't get that extra pressure on your hands. So it's a trade-off, just something to keep in mind. But overall, I found the fit to be really comfortable.
All right, I've listened to you guys tell me how great of a climber this bike is for a while now. But does that mean that the suspension might not be super active on the downs when it's time to come back down? Is there not enough small bump compliance?
I was pretty happy with it. It is a little bit firmer off the top than say that raw jib. That one just kind of sucks up everything, super plush. So this one has more support initially, but then as the level of anti-squat drops deeper in the travel, it sucks up those big bumps with no issues. Like you don't feel it in your feet or anything like that.
Yeah.
I think they've done a good job of finding that balance between a bike that can climb well and it's also supportive if you're in like mellower terrain or if you need to toss a couple pedal strokes in. But when you hit those big bumps, it's still the rear wheel gets out of the way and it doesn't cause any harshness.
Right. And I'd never heard you guys complaining about bottom out at all on this bike either.
No, it was so gentle. I think that shock on it is so well tuned for the ride and so supportive and so efficient that A, it doesn't let you bottom out harshly, but B, it also, even though it's not quite as compliant on small bumps, it'll kind of shoot you through things and want to skip through the terrain in such a nice way that you don't even want it to be compliant on the small bumps.
Yeah, interesting. It's neat. We have these 6 trail bikes here and they all use different suspension designs and they're all doing things a little bit differently. None of them are doing anything bad, but they all have some interesting traits.
One of them might be doing something.
One of them might be doing something bad-ish, but that's another story. So it sounds like overall you guys didn't have a lot to complain about when it comes to the Hugene suspension. It sounds like it's efficient, but it doesn't really give up much once you're out there on the trail as far as small bump compliance goes. Yeah. Let's move on to handling now. What's the story here? Alicia, you're pointing this bike down something steep and scary. Is this the one you want to be on or?
Yeah, actually it is the one I want to be on. This bike is all about balance. I think it is so composed and so quiet through just about anything. And even when it gets a little bit chattery, it just feels like it'll handle it. Even if it is just a 140mm bike, it feels just so ready.
Kaz?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's my favorite. It's not my top pick for the descents, but it definitely isn't held back. Like I think I like the Stump Jumper Evo a little bit better. Even maybe the raw jib in some occasions, just because for that ultimate traction. Mm-hmm. But the thing, like Alicia said, is that sense of balance. Like there wasn't anything where I was afraid to go on with this bike. It's a bike that can really kind of falls into that all-rounder category. So there's most trails, most places, I'd be totally fine to have this bike. And I think that's kind of the ultimate goal of a trail bike. You want something that you don't have to worry about. Oh, is that trail? It's going to be sketchy on this bike. The Hugene, that wasn't an issue.
It also sounds like the kind of bike that might suit terrain that's maybe rolling or maybe not super gnarly, places where momentum could help you. Mm-hmm. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would say so. I think it's a trail bike for sure. Mm-hmm. It's not an enduro bike. It's not a cross-country bike, but it's so nicely in the middle that, yeah, rolling terrain, pedaling up to pedal down, to pedal up again, to pedal down again, all day epics. This is the bike you're going to want for that.
All right. Let's talk about corners, Kaz. Out of your 6 trail bikes, which one cornered best?
That's a tough call. I think that maybe the Stump Jumper Evo cornered best for me. It's got a pretty low bottom bracket. You can make it even lower. So if you drop that into the low bottom bracket mode, the Stumpy does a lot. But this one, again, we're going to go back to the word balance. It's super balanced. It's 443 millimeter chainstays. I might be a mil or 2 off there, but it's close, somewhere around there. So not super short, but it plays well with the reach. And so you just have that nice sense of balance. Nothing strange going on. We have that score that's a super short back end and kind of longer front, which makes for some fun cornering. But this one, it's just super predictable.
And your guys' time testing actually backs up these thoughts too. It was the second fastest bike. It was beat by the score, but not by much, eh?
Yep, exactly.
Okay, you guys have said a lot of really nice things about the Hugene. I want to hear some critical things. Tell me something bad that you didn't like.
It's so hard to criticize this bike because I honestly think Propain nailed it. But if I had to nitpick, I think that the really light weight combined with the really efficient suspension make it feel just a little bit skittery sometimes through the rough stuff. Some of these bikes track really, really nicely and just want to go in a straight line and hug the ground. And the Propain didn't always have that same type of traction and grip.
All right, next up, we're going to talk component highs and lows. Casimir?
Yeah, well, one thing with the Hugene, if you're in Europe, you get a lot more choices than you do if you're in the US. They have a drop-down menu, so if you're picking your bike, you can pick the parts kit, and then you can select from different brakes, different handlebars. But ours is one of the models that you would be able to get in the US, and there's still a few little gripes that I have. So ours has a 160 millimeter dropper post, which is okay, but at 5'11", I'd like something even longer. If I lived in Europe, I could get the 185 option, but in the US, I can't. So that would be something I'd swap out. Mellower terrain, not as big a deal, but around here, again, steep trails when taking it on, I want that post all the way out of the way. So I would go with a longer dropper post. Also with the brakes, this one has SRAM's G2 brakes, which I'm not a big fan of those.
They're 4-piston, aren't they?
They're 4-piston. They're okay. You will want to swap out the organic pads for metallic, especially if it's going to be raining. It's been raining, I think, 9 out of 7 days here.
Accurate.
So, yeah, it rains a lot at this time of year. But metallic pads do make an improvement, but they're not quite as powerful as codes. And they're only 40 grams lighter than codes per wheel. So I'll take the 80 gram hit and put codes on.
I wouldn't.
Yeah, you're silly. But you can't get the codes on Propain's drop-down menu. They do offer a Magura and Formula option, so the Magura is probably a little more powerful than the G2s, but I'd like to see codes offered.
Because the G2s are pretty.
They are pretty. They're shiny silver. They look nice, and they're fine-ish most of the time, but...
Alicia, one of the spec choices that you talked about a bit to me on that bike were those Newman wheels. That's not something we see very often, Newman wheels here in America.
Yeah, we actually have them on 2 bikes this week, which is fantastic because I personally love them. I think the silent hub really complements the way the Propain rides. It's not a chaotic ride.
What about the
so quiet.
You don't like that?
If you want to get chased by a bunch of bees, go poke a hive.
I do.
You have options for that.
Yeah, baseball card and
baseball card.
Yeah, okay, all right. Kaz, what about the suspension?
Yeah, this has Fox factory suspension. It's got the 36 up front. It's one of the options. You can get this bike with a 140 mil fork or 150. Ours has the 150 36, which I think is great. Just, it kind of fits in with the aggressive trail theme we've got going on here. 36 feels great. Also has the new Float X shock. We mentioned before, good bottom out resistance. I think that the new shock has a little bit larger bottom out bumper compared to the DPX2. But that DPX2, sometimes you'd get a harsh clang. The Float X does a much better job at the end of its stroke. Really easy to adjust. So yeah, both of those are nice to see on this bike.
We're gonna move on to models and pricing now. First off, Alicia, which model do we have?
We have the high-end version, which comes with kind of top-end Fox suspension, X01 drivetrain, those G2 brakes, pretty nice build, some carbon bits. So it is the nicest option there, and it sells for about $6,700 US.
Casimir, what are the other options?
So you have the base model, starts at $4,199 US dollars. It's got a RockShox Select suspension, a GX drivetrain. Then there's performance level, that's $5,273. It's kind of like your mid-range RockShox Ultimate suspension. So you still get the high-end suspension, and then X01 drivetrain. Yeah, as far as the one I would get, I might spoil myself and go with the high-end version. I kind of like that 36. I like the...
Well, now that you've ridden it, you don't want to step down,
I know,
right?
it's pretty nice, yeah.
Good.
Yeah. What about you, Alicia? What would you spend your money on?
If it's my money, personally, I'd go with the mid-grade option. I think it still is a really great buy. You get a pretty high-end RockShox suspension and the X01 drivetrain, so you aren't making too many sacrifices except for a bit of weight.
We're gonna talk pros and cons now, and these two have told me a whole bunch of positive stuff about the Hugene, but I wanna hear some critical remarks. Kaz, get into it.
Yeah, I think one con we didn't really touch on yet is the cable routing. Cable routing's fine, but they have these weird little guides. It's like a rubber grommet that seems like it's supposed to fit into the frame to keep things from rattling, but they don't actually really fit in the frame. So you have these little rubber plugs that just kind of float around on the cables. I'd like to see that cleaned up. I'm sure there's a way, probably some aftermarket bit you could fix it with. Be nice if that was sorted. And then the other con, I do think I'd like to see the seat tube angle just a little bit steeper. Again, it's a minor detail. It's not gonna be a big deal for someone, but while I'm nitpicking, I think that'd be the one I'd go with.
What about the stuff that you do like, Alicia?
Oh, there's such a long list of this bike. But
Keep it down. I challenge you to keep it to two
keep
things.
it to 2 things. The fact that it's customizable, especially, well, particularly over in Europe, you can pick your base model or your mid-grade model and then put on whatever parts you really want. And then if I only have 2 things, I guess the bike will go back to balance. It balances competence and traction and climbing, lightweight, and all the different things that a trail bike in theory is supposed to do, but few rarely hit all the marks. I think this one actually at least touches all the marks it needs to.
Let's move on and talk about who this bike best suits. You guys have a lot of praise for this thing. Is the ideal rider Mike Casimir?
It's not quite. It's close. I'll give
Okay.
it. I'll say it's close. I think Alicia's probably the ideal rider for this. She
Yeah.
really likes it, and I like it a lot. So
Okay.
it's kind of like this. But I do think somebody that wants a bike that pedals well and descends well and isn't totally biased to one. You know, it's not just an enduro bike in disguise. It's not an XC bike dressed up to try to pretend it's a trail bike. It really fits in an aggressive trail bike. That's what this thing does.
Alicia, is Casimir right? Is this Alicia's perfect trail bike?
It is pretty close to Alicia's perfect trail bike.
What makes it that? I'm just curious. What makes it your ideal
We'll
trail
just
bike?
keep harping on the word balance.
Yeah.
It does all the things and it does them really well.
How important is it that it pedals well to you?
Pretty important, honestly.
Yeah.
I think when I'm thinking about the places I want to ride, almost all of them involve a fair amount of pedaling. And if I can enjoy the pedal, I mean, that's the majority of the time, honestly, on the bike. So
Yeah.
better have a good time while I'm there, right?
Okay, clearly Casimir and Alicia have had a great time on the Hugene, but you let us know in the comments, is this the bike for you? Or are you looking for something with more travel, something a little bit more aggressive, or maybe something a little bit more cross-country orientated? Let us know in the comments what you think of the Propain Hugene, and remember to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any field test videos.